So Tyson Fury is looking at two potential stay busy opponents, effectively, ahead of a mandatory defense against Dillian Whyte. And those two opponents would be Robert Helenius. This is apparently the list at the moment. Robert Helenius and Manuel Charr. Well, I certainly hope it's not Manuel Charr. Robert Helenius, given the fact he's coming off two good wins over Adam Kownacki, that would be acceptable as a stay busy fight. I mean, if it's a non-title fight, then even Manuel Charr would be acceptable, like the old school fighters used to do back in the days. But if he's going to put any kind of title on it, like Lineal or WBC Ring Magazine, Manuel Charr is not the guy to be in that kind of fight. So Helenius has come out and said that, obviously, he thinks he can beat Tyson Fury, because why wouldn't he say that if he's angling for the big payday? And his confidence is sure to be up after those two wins over Kownacki. And that was really a change of fortune for Robert Helenius, who'd lost to people like Gerald Washington, which is a really bad loss to have on your record against Gerald Washington. So he managed to turn his fortunes around, beat Kownacki a couple times. Kownacki, of course, had beaten Gerald Washington in a couple of rounds, right? To put things in perspective. So you've got this whole rock, paper, scissors dynamic going on there. So Robert Helenius says that Tyson Fury's style is easier for him to figure out than Alexander Usyk. And I can kind of see why he would say that. Tyson Fury is a big guy like Robert Helenius. So Helenius isn't going to be baffled by a smaller guy moving around the ring, making it awkward for him. And Helenius, I thought, looked looser and more relaxed in those two Kownacki fights, particularly the second fight, than I've ever seen him before. But bear in mind, Helenius has lost to, lots of people over the years, including Dillian Whyte, who basically won every round against Robert Helenius about 5 years ago. So when you put that in the context of Tyson Fury potentially not fighting Dillian Whyte next, the fact he's fighting a former Dillian Whyte victim 5 years after Dillian Whyte beat him is still not a good look. But nevertheless, Helenius is a big, strong, powerful guy. He's heavy-handed. His confidence is going to be high. And although I wouldn't be picking Helenius to win, Tyson Fury would definitely have to watch out, because Helenius does punch hard. And I do put Helenius up there as a legitimate world-class puncher. Not a world, top 5 fighter aside from his punching power, but the punching power is for real and is definitely legit. So Fury would have to be careful. And when you're looking at a stay busy fight, ideally you don't want to pick somebody who's a real big puncher. Ideally, you might want to pick somebody who's credible, but perhaps they don't hit that hard, because you could be winning every round against the big puncher and then just get caught. Whereas if you're fighting someone who is credible, but they're not a big puncher, you could be winning every round, and it's very unlikely that it's going to come out with one big shot and take you out or change the course of the fight. So, yeah, those are the two names being talked about. Robert Helenius, Manuel Charr. I certainly hope it's Helenius. Ideally, obviously, I'd like to see the Dillian Whyte fight next. If not, Dillian Whyte fight, even more ideally, I'd like to see the undisputed unification with Usyk. But that doesn't appear to be happening. So therefore, the next best thing has got to be the mandatory defense against Dillian Whyte. And we'll see where that goes. I'll do a separate video about that. But for now, let me know what you guys think in the comments below about a prospect of Tyson Fury fighting a Robert Helenius or a Manuel Charr. I mean, why is Manuel Charr on the list? I've spoken before about how Tyson Fury has kind of taken a leaf out of Floyd Mayweather's book in terms of how he manages his career. He's not a guy like a Muhammad Ali. I mean, there are similarities in personality between him and Ali, but what isn't similar between Tyson Fury and Ali is Fury's willingness to fight anyone at any time, and his willingness to try and run right through the heavyweight division and take on all comers. That's not Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury is more from the Mayweather school of boxing management, where he fights very good fighters, yes, but he picks and chooses when he fights them very carefully, and in between fighting elite level opposition, he takes a lot of easier touches. That is what Floyd Mayweather was doing for a long time. And in the case of Floyd Mayweather, an easier touch might be a guy who used to be champion, used to be something special, but these days he's like 38, 40 years of age. And when I say these days, I'm talking about this is what Mayweather used to do back in the days when he was on his campaign at welterweight. He'd take on guys that were a bit over the hill, a bit past their best, and he'd take them on at the right time. Or he'd do a catch weight fight or something like that, despite admonishing Manny Pacquiao for doing catch weight fights previously. So, yeah, Mayweather, great fighter, but he was very clever about the way he chose his opponents. Tyson Fury is the same, or at least similar. He's very clever about who he fights and when he fights them. He isn't a guy that's just trying to fight anybody at any time. He's careful about who he fights. And Manuel Charr is in keeping with that habit that Tyson Fury has of picking people carefully in between fighting elite opposition. And even when he's fighting the elite opposition, he's careful about when to fight them and which elite opponent to fight. You see it. So, some people have talked about the fact that Dillian Whyte knows Tyson Fury. He's not intimidated by Tyson Fury. And if you look at his personality type, it's a bit different to what Tyson Fury's used to facing. Deontay Wilder's, I guess, the closest thing to Dillian Whyte in terms of the personality because he's very aggressive like Dillian Whyte is. But Dillian Whyte is a smarter, not just boxer than Deontay Wilder, but a smarter human being all round. So this is not someone who is as easy to wind up and to get under their skin as it is for Tyson Fury with Deontay Wilder, because you're dealing with a more intelligent guy and a guy who knows Tyson Fury personally, a guy who's been in several Tyson Fury training camps, a guy who says he dropped Tyson Fury multiple times and had him weeping on the canvas at one point. So it is a bit different when you've got that kind of history with a guy, yeah, whereby you maybe won't be able to intimidate the guy or won't be able to get under his skin to the degree that you did with certain other opponents. So anyway, I'll discuss that in a separate video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below about Tyson Fury's potential list of opponents for his next fight.